Okay, yeah, I have a little presentation about red-cockaded woodpeckers. I'm trying to make this one a fun one. I've been doing them for a super long time, and there's a lot of new things happening, which are all very positive. So I'm going to try to share my screen and see if we can get it going. So this slide shows some pictures of the red-cockaded woodpecker. If you guys aren't super familiar with it, the main characteristics to identify it from Downies and Harrys, for example, is it has a white cheek patch. I think they've even tried to name it leucocephalus for a short time. I don't even know what the scientific name is right now. They've changed it 2 or 3 times, and they might have changed it back to what it was. I don't even know. And the other characteristic is it has barring all the way across the back. So if you look at those other species, they'll have a white back. And anyway, and this one has barring all the way across the back. And there's a little baby one in somebody's hand. There's a bird in the hand right there. So this gives you the size. You know, it's about the size of a cardinal, maybe a tiny bit smaller. I don't know, a little skinnier maybe. So it's bigger than a downy, and about the same size as a hairy. So if you see a hairy, to me a hairy is a little bit skinnier even than an RCW, and it has a white back and a black stripe across its cheek. And then if you see one in Croom or most everywhere else, RCW will probably have bands on its legs. That'll be a good indicator too. The next one is it shows all these white cheek patch, barring, sides of a cardinal, sounds like a dog squeak toy. If you want to find them in the woods and you're not with Beverly Hanson, and it's daytime, you're just gonna have to find them by the sound. They do sound exactly like a dog squeak toy. If I walk in Croom or run in Croom or whatever, I can almost always find them by hearing them. But that's like, I'm like the quintessential birder. I know everything about one species and nothing about all of the rest. So it's funny that way. I'm not very well-rounded birder, and I should spend more time with other folks sometimes. Red is a misnomer. You can almost never see the red. On an adult male, it will have a little tiny red cockade, and those folks who painted them originally back in the day would hold a dead specimen in their hand, and if you blow on the head or whatever, you can see some red cockade feathers on the males. That's about it. Every once in a while there will be a male, it'll be fighting or he'll be excited about something, and just the feathers on his head will puff out, and if you have a good spotting scope or whatever, you'll be able to see the cockade. But it's just like 3 or 4 little feathers there on the top of the eye patch. On this photo, you could actually see it. You know, it doesn't really show up as red. It's kind of it's that little spot above the white cheek patch behind the eye. Anyway, and they always live. They prefer. I mean, unless things are not going well, it lives in a cavity tree, and a cavity tree is associated with the grouping of trees, so we call that a cluster. So if you talk about grouping of birds, it's called a group, and if you call it a grouping of trees, it's called a cluster. Anyway, and then the last thing, I just added this one, it's altricial, and you guys all know what that means. The young are very needy on their parents. They don't jump out of the cavity and run around like a little chicken or something like that. So, and that's one of the crucial points about banding them, because we band them when they're still young. I think I have some pictures of that. So now I have some photos of them taken by various folks. Jerome Jackson came down, and you know, my funny story about him is he's one of the world authorities on woodpeckers. He knew more about them probably even before I was born. And one time I gave a talk to an Audubon group, and I'm talking, and I think I'm Mr. Know-it-all. And then he raises his hand at the end, and he asks me, "Do you know who I am?" And I go, "Oh no." "Who are you?" "I'm Jerome Jackson." I go, "I am not worthy." "I am not worthy." You're the man. Anyway, then I asked him if I made any glaring mistakes in my presentation and so on. He was pleased. But anyway, he came out to Croom the next day and he took this photo, and I thought, well, Jerome deserves to have a photo in my presentation. And this is, you know, a beautiful classic photo of, and that is a male. If you look really closely, I think you can see a little bit of red, a little bit forward of where it was in that other photo. And it's perched in front of a cavity. So he was out there during nesting season. So it's really easy to photograph them because they have to feed their young about every 7 minutes or so. So, you know, you could just kind of set up and photograph them as they come and go. It's pretty easy that time of year. Sometimes they feed as often as 3 minutes, every 3 minutes. And sometimes if a half hour goes by and the babies aren't fed, they're going to be hungry little babies. Maybe sometime around noon, maybe when the parents slow down on their feeding or the helper male slows down on their feeding, then maybe they'll have to go without food that long. But for the most part, they're fed very frequently. Here's another photo. Debbie Grimes, if you guys know her, she's one of my volunteers. She helps me in crew, and she got this picture of a young male, and he's foraging on an oak tree. So that picture should never happen. Normally they forage on pine trees, which is not a very rich foraging source. You have to cover a lot of ground to get enough food for a good-sized bird like this. So they're constantly foraging, but sometimes, maybe about 10% of the time in Croom, they'll go into oaks and forage on oak trees too. But you won't find that in the literature. I think I have another picture of a young male. So sometimes the volunteers would send me pictures of the young males, because if it has that little red yarmulke on it, that's a male. And if it doesn't have a red yarmulke, it's a female. And it's only in their very first set of plumage, right after they fledge. So you got that little red spot until maybe November, December, when maybe they molt, and then they lose that little red patch. So if we want to know what sex they are, in order, when we do translocations, then some intrepid person has to get up early in the morning. And almost always I'm able to use volunteers here, because I guess I'm a lazy bird biologist. So I have recruited Bev Hansen and the Grimes and a few others. You'll see some of their photos to go out in the morning and do the sex checks for me. I'm spoiled. I realize that. I appreciate every moment they do that, because I get to sleep more in my life, and that's good. I have a couple more photos that were taken by my volunteers. This one was taken by Myrna Bradshaw, and I absolutely love it. She got the wings extended and flying, and I think it even has a little grub or something in its beak. It's probably flying into the cavity to feed its young. But she was a volunteer for a little while. She gave me some wonderful photos. All she asks is that I put her name on them if I ever use them, and no other stipulations. But for a photo like this, I'll do whatever she requires. Beautiful. I have another wonderful photo that she took of an RCW launching out of the cavity. You can see that cavity is an insert. It has a white PVC entrance. You can probably use your imagination and maybe see there might be a little face there sort of peeking out. So it just fed the young, and it's launching, and it's kind of funny how it steps out and then it just drops. And, you know, of course, almost all woodpeckers, all that I know of, tend to fly by swooping. They kind of quit flapping for a moment and start to swoop downward, and then they flap harder and then swoop back up. And their flight pattern is a series of arcs. You'll get to see that if you come see them when you guys come out on the 19th. It's interesting. And if you notice, there's a little as the wing beat picks up, and it makes a little excessive noise or whatever, and that's one way you can find them if you haven't followed them from a morning from their cavities, and you just have to find them in the middle of the day. Sometimes you lose it out there. And then of course, and their dog squeak toy sound that they make. But in the winter time, they don't call very much. Sometimes they don't call at all. So finding them in the winter time is harder than other times of the year. Springtime, they call a lot because they're probably asserting themselves and their territories from other red-cockaded woodpeckers. But in the winter, they seem to not really be as territorial. They form in groups of multiple groups of birds from various clusters sometimes. I think this might be when they might pair up if there's young of the year, or other socializing activities will be in the winter. And then as soon as spring starts to roll around, they get very territorial and they defend their territories with great ongoing battles and so on. So anyway, this time of year, when you see them, it will probably be relatively quiet. If you're with Bev, you will find them guaranteed. She's probably spent more time with woodpeckers than anybody ever, just about. She gives me about a weekly report about what's going on in Croom, which is invaluable for our management. And this is a distribution map. This shows all the blue counties are ones where they historically occurred, and all the little red dots are where they currently occur. And you'll see that the only county that doesn't seem to make sense is Sumter County. I have found some historic woodpecker trees in Sumter County, so it should be blue, but it is, I don't know who to give the data to update this map. And you can see it was made in 2002, so probably no one will bother to update it. But anyway, they're still present in a lot of counties, which is good news. And most of their occurrences are on big conservation lands, say like the Withlacoochee State Forest, or military bases is a good place for them, because military bases have to really carefully follow federal guidelines and federal rules by the Endangered Species Act. State agencies, water management districts, FWC, different state agencies in other states. I think there might even be an Indian reservation, but a lot of agencies have decided to manage these birds, and it's good news. And you'll see more about our plight as we go on. So here's their typical life cycle, so you could follow it. They lay their eggs in April. They usually hatch in early May, and they're very fast to hatch. The eggs hatch in 10 to 11 days. I've heard, you can quote me on this, but I may not be accurate. They are about the fastest egg to hatch. You know, chicken takes what, 21 days. You guys probably know how a lot of other species, how long it takes, but 10 to 11 days is pretty darn fast. They're nestling for less than a month. So, you know, in 38 days, they go from a gleam in their daddy's eye to flying, which is really remarkably fast. And then they fledge. Their parents feed them for a period of time. Some are more needy than others. Some will be needy for several months. Some of them decide to be independent really quickly, and within you know, just a few weeks, they could be completely on their own in a new cavity and everything. So, but somewhere around October, November, December, the little chicks go out there in the world and try to find a cavity of their own. Everybody has their own cavity. I have actually seen daddy teaching them to go inside cavities, and maybe even choosing the cavity for them. which is really fun because he peeks his head in a little bit and he comes back out, peeks his head a little bit, and he's like the baby, you know, the fledgling is right there watching, and then if the fledgling understands the lesson, then they'll peek their head in there and so on. It's really kind of a great characteristic to be able to see. If you watch them a lot, maybe you'll get to see that at some point. And then they disperse, but the males don't always disperse. They sometimes stay with the family group, or often stay with the family group. So the family group will often consist of a male and a female, which is the breeding pair, and then male helpers from previous nests up to including 10 years in the past. And the male will hang out at home and live with the parents and cause their group size to be larger for a while, maybe in the back of his mind, hoping that daddy will die so he could have a breeding vacancy. Otherwise, he never becomes a breeder. So if that happens, if he's lucky enough that daddy does eventually get picked off or whatever happens to him, then he assumes a position. And if the female that's present with his daddy is his mommy, then he kicks her out, or she voluntarily leaves and he finds his own female. So don't have to worry about incestuous relations in woodpeckers. They know quite well how to keep that from happening. And it's amazing how well they know each other and know who they're related to. And even though, you know, they can live right next door to their brothers and sisters and daddies and mommies, it's amazing how they can find a mate that's not related. So I don't know if they have a little family tree or what they got going on, but anyway, it's pretty effective. They breed for life, and that's really romantic, but life in a bird world is not necessarily all that long. Eventually one gets picked off, but they can live up to 17 years. If they do lose their mate, they'll pick up a new one if things are going well. When I said the males stay as helpers, the females disperse right away and they go wreak havoc. So the females will charge out into the world and try to find a cavity. And if they have to displace another female, they will. And there will be fights and battles, and the males just sit there and watch. It's like whoever wins, wins. He doesn't intervene. He doesn't have any great love for his mate or whatever. If the new female comes along and wins, then he's got a new mate. The only problem is that new females are not as productive. So the nests produced by the young females will often not produce as many offspring, at least right away. The old females and the old males are the ones that produce a lot of chicks between 1 and 4, well, 0 and 4. 3 is about as good as it gets. I don't know if a nest in Croom has ever produced 4 fledglings. So anyway, usually 1 to 3 is about average. The question is, why do I devote my entire life to this little bird, which I basically have done for 23 years? Well, I'll admit that I love them, but they may not be my most beloved thing in the world. My most beloved thing is what's in my hand in that photo. That's a little gopher frog tadpole. We have an anise swallowtail, and we have a squirrel, a Sherman's fox squirrel. Anyway, we realized from the start that when we managed woodpeckers and manage a habitat good enough for them, since they are very, very, very picky about their habitat, that the other animals in the world and plants would also benefit. So I'm not going to say it's, you know, it's an indicator species of good habitat. So it has a federal listing. So I was able to use that federal listing to get more support in managing the habitat. But woodpecker was almost like a pawn in my scheme to manage the habitat that we have here, which is pretty rare. It's called sandhill. So woodpecker is I love them. They're a pawn for me anyway. Other things that benefit from their management is, of course, gopher tortoises. Gopher tortoises live in the exact same habitat as red-cockaded woodpeckers. They also require a similar habitat. We'll have some habitat photos. And Peter, just so you know, I get long-winded. So when you think it's time to end this, just give me like 5 minutes and I'll wrap it up. Because I don't even really know what time I started. So. Okay, another animal that benefits is pocket gophers. And you almost never see them. I think in my 22 or 23 years here, I've seen 2. But I see plenty of evidence that they exist in their little mounds. Sometimes these little mounds will make their way onto golf courses and lawns and stuff. I love them. They're usually in a row. They are very popular or very numerous in areas where the habitat is in good shape for woodpeckers in the sandhills. So when you're out there in Croom, if you go, look for pocket gopher mounds. So now I'm going to describe to you some things that you will really care about. And this is interesting that you had brought this up. Bachman sparrow. Bev Hansen took this picture for me. They are numerous in woodpecker habitat. If the habitat is good enough for woodpeckers, it's good enough for Bachmans. We have this area called the ERP area, Upland Restoration Area. Co-manage or some help from FWC. And in our ERP area where we manage woodpeckers and all this stuff, we had a lot of points taken where people are monitoring them on a point system where they go and listen for them calling a certain time of the day. And every single point had at least 1 Bachman's. So Bachman's, they are all over Citrus and Croom. So if you guys don't have any luck down there at Starkey or whatever, come up to Citrus and Croom. I do think they call later in the day. And of course, in springtime, when they're fighting for territories, I'm sure you're gonna you'll hear them, and I love to hear them. They're you know, they have that crazy call that never sounds the same. You know, a trill and another trill, or a note and a trill, or a trill and a note. But usually it usually comes in like 2 measures, and one of them's a faster or slower trill, and maybe another pitch. So it's really bizarre how they call like that. Always different, but it's always very melodic, and I love hearing it. And our woodpecker management has been really good for them. There's a great birder that works for Tall Timbers, and he used to complain and gripe that our Bachmans were not doing very well until we started managing red-cockadeds, and now he is quite happy that we're working so hard for them. Another species that benefits from RCW management is northern bobwhite. Greg Hagan from FWC sent me this picture. Yeah, they like frequent burning, you know, open prairie systems with a lot of herbaceous ground cover where the young can hide and so on, and growing season burns and all these things that woodpeckers like. You know, by the way, I didn't even know, I knew that when we were managing for woodpeckers, I was managing for other species, but I didn't have a little name on the list, you know, and over time, I have developed that list of the other species. Now this one is very interesting, common nighthawk. Someone actually was tagging them in South America and they put the radio tags on them, and they tracked them from South America, and they found them all in the citrus tract. And now they're studying them in the citrus tract. And they call me up one day and they go, "Hey, do you know you have our common nighthawks?" And I'm going, wait a minute, because usually we ban birds here and follow them to South America. This was the reverse. They were tagging them down there and following them up here. And they were telling me, "Oh, you better burn and you got to do all these things because the common nighthawk is becoming less and less common." I go, Well, yeah, we've been managing for them since 1998. And we have a lot of them. And, you know, they're fun because in the summertime, they do that bombing call where they dive bomb and then they hold their wings out and it has this sort of drumming sound. And they have this terrible, you know, high pitched whatever. They're very interesting though. I like the drumming sound. I don't really like their peeping sound, but anyway, this is a picture that Steve and Jane Mann provided. They're my other great volunteers. If you guys know them, thank them. If you see them on the 18th or whatever, thank them because they have been great volunteers too. I never give them enough credit, but they took this beautiful picture, and I love this picture because it shows that that white wing bar. So they nest, and you guys know that they're very meticulous in their nest building. They work hours and hours and hours. Now they just drop 2 eggs on the ground somewhere, and that's it. And then you're like, you know, we probably burn up a lot of their nests when we do our prescribed burning, but they re-nest, and they prefer frequently and recently burned sandhills, probably because then their nest would be less likely to burn up in subsequent years. So you'll find that pattern and of maybe a certain number of years since something was burned that it might have a higher frequency of nesting behavior. And that certainly could be the case for common nighthawks. We have a lot in citrus and crume, and I'm not sure if they're even here this time of year, but they will be in the spring and the fall. Fun to watch. And this is I just could not resist this picture. Myrna Bradshaw took this one. And if you see, it's an adult lying on top of a chick, keeping it warm or something like that, which is like the cutest picture I've ever seen. And I thought I had to include this, but this just shows you how useful my volunteers are, that not only do they do surveys and things for me, but they send me wonderful pictures. And so some of these pictures no one else has ever seen unless Myrna's been showing it around. But yeah, common nighthawk. I almost stepped on one time when I was jogging. I was running at night with a headlamp, and there was a bright light. As you know, a lot of eyes reflect in the dark, and there's bright light right on the trail. And I run up to it, and I bend over to look it down and jockey and see what it is. And it was so blended in with the ground that the eye was the only thing I could see, until eventually I made out the form of the bird, and it still didn't fly. I think I stepped over it and kept going. So anyway, I could have picked it up. So it was a remarkable little interaction there, but that was in crume. And the one that's proving to maybe be maybe not more interesting than the nighthawk, but the kestrel. As you guys may know, the southeastern American kestrels are year-round in Florida, and they love to build their nests in old red-cockaded woodpecker cavities. So if a woodpecker builds a cavity, and then a pileated woodpecker or pileateds usually, or a red belly will pound on it until they enlarge the opening to some degree so they can fit in it. And then a kestrel will find that to its liking, and it will nest in the old cavity. So indirectly, by managing woodpeckers, we have been providing a lot of nesting habitat for kestrels. And we have a lot of trouble with population studies of things like kestrels, because they also nest in snags, with, you know, dead pine trees, and nesting in boxes, and it's very hard to census a species that's so randomly distributed in so many different places. But we have been kind of marking and mapping where nesting locations are, and it's proving to be citrus and crume are proving to be very important reproductive areas for kestrels as time goes on. So about the habitat, they like wet flatwoods or mesic flatwoods, which you guys may be familiar with. Flatwoods are much more common than sandhill. They're wetter. They usually have a clay layer down below. if they're properly burned, they'll be a prairie. In fact, they'll almost be indistinguishable from a sandhill, except instead of a lot of oaks, you'll have palmetto and gallberry. And then, wet flatwoods is grassier usually without as much palmetto, but Music Flatwoods has a lot of palmetto and gallberry. Sandhill is what we were blessed with on the Withlacoochee State Forest, which is most of what Croom was, it's sandy soil dominated by longleaf pine and grasses. Mostly people say wiregrass. I think I have a picture of it coming in, and a lot of herbaceous species. I have actually a picture of some of the sandhill species that are numerous. And then clay hills and high pine and upland pine, which are mostly North Florida things. So I don't really know much about them, but they still have the prairie-like ecosystem, and longleaf pines mostly dominating. Colleen Werner, my biologist, just found a tall grass prairie species in citrus last week. So we have a lot in common with the prairies, even of Kansas and those Nebraska, those prairies. We are very similar. We have a lot of the same genera. And it was amazing that she found a grass that was actually the same species as a tall grass species. So I thought that was pretty cool. So here's some famous places that maintain woodpeckers that sent me pictures of their habitat, which I used for a native plant talk. But this is Blackwater. I have a couple pictures of Blackwater. See grassy. This is pitcher plants and so on. Recently burned. You see the char on the trees. So on. I think I have another picture of Blackwater, a little bit more upland. But anyway, you see prairie system dominated by pine trees, usually longleaf, but sometimes if the habitat's been manipulated, sometimes slash pine will do, or in slightly more mesic sites, black slash pine will take the place of longleaf. RCWs just don't care. Slash pine, longleaf, they're not too picky. And then even loblolly in some places where it's old fields. But anyway, that's Blackwater. Here's Fort Stewart. Fort Stewart in northern Georgia. Beautiful place, like 600,000 acres of incredible habitat. A few bombing ranges here and there. Some places you probably should avoid. If you're going there, it's very noisy at night when they're doing military operations. But woodpeckers don't really not mind noise and don't really mind people. It's amazing. So especially the ones that have been followed around by my volunteers, because they get really close so they can read the bands, and after being chased around for years, you get used to people. So when you go to Croom, you're going to find a much more docile, tame bird than you would at Fort Stewart. If you go to try to look at RCWs in Fort Stewart, you're lucky if you get 100 yards from them, and they fly up to the other side of they crawl around to the opposite side of the tree. But in Croom, they'll land right above your head and look down. Sometimes they fly to me when I'm running or something and say hi. So it's pretty amazing. So Croom is the best place to see them for that reason. Corbett. So we got the South Central Florida populations. Those are kind of around Lake Okeechobee, and you see the density of pine trees is really low, which probably is not that good for RCWs, but they live there. And Corbett and Dupuis and Webb and Three Lakes and all those places have them down south. And Apalachicola National Forest, again, they follow all the rules of the federal guidelines. I'll show you a picture of that book. And they do an excellent job of managing woodpeckers. In fact, they do such a good job that they have been one of the biggest populations that translocated birds to other places, including here. So the birds you see will probably be Apalachicola stock at some point in their life. Their great grandparents were hand carried from Apalachicola National Forest and released in Croom, and mixed with the natural Croom birds, which we had about 7. Anyway, there's a wade track, famous wade track. If you ever get a chance, Southern Georgia, North Florida, you should go there. That's supposedly one of the best remaining and perfectly well managed. It's not a sandhill. it's a red hills probably, which is maybe like sandhill except with clay hills. Well burned, managed, studied, incredible. It's private land. There's almost no place to see a better pineland than on the Wade Track. Jim Cox took this photo for me. He works up there a lot. He's also the one that was complaining that we weren't taking very good care of Bachman sparrows for a while, till we were. Of course, Croom is not to be outdone. This is Croom in a little bit in the fall, late summer. Croom is spectacular. It is just like those other places. Open, grassy, herbaceous, wildflowers, multi-age longleaf pines. Yeah, you don't have to go all the way to the Wade Tract to see good pinelands. And then a citrus tract in Citrus County, South Central Citrus County. Very similar management. We have become very good at burning, and these habitats are starting to look remarkable. Even the Nature Conservancy has recognized us as I forget exactly what they call it, but a site that is has reached its potential. I'll come up with it at some point. I probably should have written it down. Anyway, and then this is what makes, yes?
I think leave some time for questions. If you could finish up in a few minutes, that would be great.
Okay, here we go. I'm going to show you, these are the people that are involved. And the main one that started here is Andy Chrisman. She's the one that started it all. She was my original boss. She's out there in the world still, doing a lot. These are what you have to do: burn, manage cavities, and we use translocations. And there's the manual that shows, it tells, it's a recipe for how to manage woodpeckers. So you could even be as simple as me and still manage woodpeckers if you follow this recipe. And I have a bunch of pictures of burning. There's burning in Croom, burning in citrus. There's immediately post-burn with Colleen looking satisfied that we just completed this burn, and that is beautiful. I love a pine stand right after it burned. And then here is a reminder of what this habitat would look like if it never burned. So this is a xeric hammock. This is a climax community in the absence of fire. This spot is in Croom. If anybody ever wants to see what Croom would look like if it never ever burned, this spot, it still exists. It's about a 60-acre island or so. Here's putting in inserts, burning. This is one of the first translocations. On that board right there is how Croom decided to become a recipient population, and birds got sent from Appalachia, which we carried down here. And here we are banding the birds, and that's how big they are, 7 to 8 days old when we band them. And there they are in the cavity. We also do this thing called foiling, prevents snakes from getting the nests. At some point we'll quit doing it, but it raises our potential for a nest to be successful by 10%. And then here's our growth trend. So you can see in 1998, we had no managed clusters, and we had 5 active, 5 meaning they had at least 1 bird, and 2 that had a pair. And this is the growth ever since. So this is what we've done in Croom. And then the next picture is this, the circles indicate a cluster. So the orange and the blues are the ones that are active. Orange meaning it has a pair. So this is what the population looked like in 1998. That's Croom. And that's what it looked like last year. So all those are breeding pairs. So that was the success. Citrus chart, a little bit the same. It started out with a lot more and it's growing slower, but it's still growing like crazy. And then I won't even discuss this. But anyway, this is the varied ground cover that you want to see. This is why RCW management is so good and burning is so good. You don't have to know what those species are. You just have to see, look at all those different leaf patterns and all those different grasses and all those different, that's what you want. And here's wiregrass. And here is Chamacrista, which is, I should have written the common name down at partridge pea. and this Chromaria. And so these are some of the species that have become particularly abundant after we started burning a lot. Liatris elegans. And this picture, I just love this picture of native plant people, Cindy Liverton on the right, standing in the Liatris in the morning. And then of course lupin and butterflies. But here's the new news. Headquarters tract is right between Citrus and Croom, and it's in really good shape because we use it as a training center. So we moved woodpeckers into headquarters this year. We moved 3 pairs from Fort Stewart, and all 6 birds are still there. And this picture right here is the first active tree in headquarters in over 50 years. So we now have a subpopulation between Citrus and Croom. I'm hoping that it will cause migration to move back and forth between the 2 populations. So anyway, that's my goal, to get those 2 to function as one population. And then we can reach E.O. Wilson's magical 250 breeding pairs. God rest his soul. And there a picture of them in headquarters. That's the trees. And you see in the background behind John is the buildings. So from the training center, from the dorms, you can see woodpecker trees. So that's a big accomplishment. And there's 2 birds living in that cluster right now. So people can wake up in the morning and in the dorms to the sound of woodpeckers. And now we're doing a lot of our burning with drones. Here's a picture of our drone. It drops up to 500 balls of fire wherever we want them to land. It has sped up our burn program, made it more efficient. And it has some technical hurdles that we're still dealing with, but this changes burning and has become very important. And like I said, it increases safety because no one has to go into the burns anymore. And here it is on its first maiden voyage, lighting a pasture. Okay, I flew through those last ones with my last 5 minutes. Does anybody have any wonderful questions for me?
Vince, do you create artificial nesting holes for them?
Yes. So what we have, let me see. Can we close this up? Can we stop sharing and get back to my image?
Yes.
I have one right here. So this is an artificial cavity, PVC lining, metal face to keep other woodpeckers from blowing it out. Painted with polymers to keep it from absorbing sap and becoming a death trap for them. All I have to do is climb 23 feet up in the tree and cut a chunk out of the tree this size and putty it in. Then I put a bunch of putty over the face, paint it, they move right in. I've seen an RCW move into one of these 5 minutes after I put it, when the putty was still wet. And the woodpecker landed on it and shook its little foot, and it touched it and it shook its little foot and pecked, shook its beak because the putty is all wet, and then boom, went in. They love them. The entrance is exactly the right size for them, and it's a little bit too small for red bellies, so sometimes it repels red bellies, which will steal the cavities. But other things can't get in there except for flying squirrels. But anyway, yeah, this is one, and we could slap one of these in like 30 minutes. So we can create a woodpecker cluster. If the habitat's in order, we could just in 4 hours we could have a whole new cluster for them. And I don't make these. A guy named Stan Addis in Georgia makes them. We buy them for about $50 a piece or something like that. Very worthwhile. Very difficult to make. I don't know how he makes them that cheap. So anyway, this is an insert. Any more questions? I will try to be out there on the 19th. If I can make it, I'll join you guys.
Thank you. I actually do have a couple of questions.
Okay.
How many pairs do you now have?
So in citrus, we're approaching 100, and in Croom, we're about 40. Okay. So we started about 40 in Croom. So it went from, citrus from 40 to 100, and in Croom, we just had 2 at first. and now we have about almost 40, so 140.
I'm wondering, is there, I mean, they're extirpated in Pasco. Would there be any chance of reintroducing them to,
Yes,
yeah, so maybe
you
start,
have to, Starkey might be big enough. Of course, I think, didn't you put a road right down the middle of it, which is going to be a very big problem for burning. But it might be big enough, but burning probably has to be even more frequent than every 5 years.
right.
I think we're trying to get down to every 2 to 3 now.
We're working with Jim Cox and Tall Timbers on that research
Oh,
project.
good. Oh, yeah. Well, he's the man.
Yeah.
Whatever he will not steer you astray. So, like I said, he used to make fun of us and put with the Coochie as being we were in trouble in his presentations and then so on. And then when we started taking care of woodpeckers, I invited him down and say, "You cannot badmouth us anymore. We're doing all this stuff." And we officially got off the naughty list. So now if you can keep that property with the challenges of the parkway and such, and the new roadway through it, if you can get the burning down to 2 to 3 or 4 years, it's possible. And now I'm creating a meta population here, which may include Shinsegat and other places, Marsh Tract, which is one of ours and headquarters. I'm trying to create a meta population amongst just more rural landscapes and not these huge lands. So if they start wandering all around in here, you know, we could be a source of translocated birds and so on. It's doable. I mean, it might not be self-sustaining. You know, you might not be able to reach 250 breeding pairs, but they move around and such. It's possible.
Do you, I mean, I was very interested in the drone burning too. And I haven't heard about that being done before. Do you work with Swiftmud on the Swiftmud properties, or are they a completely separate entity and managing separately?
They're separate. We sort of have slightly different goals and objectives, but we have tried to work with FWC and them to restore RCWs into the green swamp. And they do actually have a good RCW biologist there who worked with me on Croom. So, we did a burn with them just 2 days ago, where we used our helicopter and we burned some acreage in Richloam in the green swamp together as a team. So we do work with them from time to time, and we're friends with them. And maybe someday we'll manage. And I don't know how much of the green swamp is in Pasco County, but if they were to get into the green swamp, that would be another opportunity to get RCWs into Pasco County. But you have to get a lot of people involved. You have to get FWC and Swiftmud and Fish and Wildlife Service all to agree at the same time in the same place that they want to put them in the green swamp. Green swamp could probably handle them.
Okay, I guess it's baby steps, but
yeah, we've tried a few times, and I pushed it for a while, and then Nancy Dwyer from Sumter County pushed it for a while. One of their biologists pushed it for a while, but we never could get all 3 agencies at the same place at the same time to reach an agreement. And you know, if you guys know, Kevin Love was working with them, and he was trying, but I don't know, the magic didn't happen yet, but that doesn't mean it won't. And that would also potentially get them in the direction of being in our Richland tract, which right now we're still not discussing. We're still in baby steps on that, but we're starting to get Richland in order in terms of burning. In the last 3 years, we've burned more than we ever have. So Richland is starting to come around, and maybe someday you guys might want to take a field trip out there and see that the green swamp and Richland are starting to look really good.
well, one of the things that really interested me in your presentation was the relationship between Hernando Audubon members, the Manns, the Grimes, the Hansons, to monitor. So you're doing all the land management, but they're really helping with the monitoring. And so Starkey is really convenient for us. Green Swamp is a long way out there. But there's one other place I'm thinking of, and that is Crossbar Ranch. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Yeah, I mean, they have scrub jays there. I don't think it's big. I don't really know. I'm not familiar enough to know. It would have to be at least probably a couple thousand acres of pineland in order to consider it.
I'd have to look at that. It's definitely a lot of pine, but this
Yeah.
this scrub is a completely separate area of it. I just
Yeah.
don't think they have, but
Because
uh,
you have about you need about 120 acres for each pair of woodpeckers. Remember I said how unproductive pine bark is for finding food? Well, you need 120 acres for 3 little birds to feed their bellies. So if you want to have maybe 20 breeding groups is probably what you would need to be semi-sustainable. You know, you're looking at a couple thousand acres.
that's fantastic. Thank you so much. Are there any other questions? Just take yourself off mute.
Okay, then. We'll all have a wonderful, dreary Saturday. I'm glad so many of you guys listened to me, and like I said, I'll try to make it out on the 19th. But if you get to spend 1 minute with Bev Hansen, you're blessed.
I'll definitely ask if Bev is willing to join us that day. I'll see if
Yeah. And like I said, if like the others you mentioned, the Mans and Debbie Grimes and all those people, they have been instrumental because they save me so much time and effort. It allows me to spend time and effort managing that habitat. So they have been very helpful, and I want to give them all the credit in the world. And hopefully one of them can join you, because they have watched the birds a lot, and they know each one specifically.
We have to go into the man, so we'll see. It would be wonderful if they would be able to accompany it.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Vince.
All right. Thank you, guys, and yeah, enjoy. Even if I don't see you there, though, come to Crim anytime, man. You'll love it.
Definitely. Hope to see you there.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. All right. Bye-bye. See if I can click the right button here to exit stage left.
Hi, Nancy. Nice to see you.